Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to do a video based on a steering wheel base and pedals that is overdue for at least 10 months. And because of certain circumstances, these products didn't arrive, and unfortunately I couldn't do it any sooner. But regardless of that, we finally have it here, and we have loads of things to compare with other manufacturers, and we're going to go through. Well, I'll try to go as detailed as possible. So regarding that, we're going to talk about Logitech G Pro steering wheel base and pedals. That is definitely a huge step forward compared to G923, G920, G29 and all the other before, right? So we have a direct drive base, we have an interesting quick release, we have a different approach on the steering wheel, and we have much higher quality pedals, I would say, just by looking at them. But since I've driven these already and I already know what to expect, definitely much better feel when pressing any of the pedals compared to G923, G920, G29. Because we aren't talking about plastic right here. But before we go into pedals, let's start with the price. So we have the wheel package, which comes with wheel and the base. 1,099 euros, while in the US it's $999, and the pedals are 389 euros or $349. Mentioning the base, we have peak 11 Newton meters, which is 4 times stronger than G920 and G923, since they are at somewhere around 2.5 Newton meters of torque. Now, what's the difference between the direct drive and the standard wheelbase from the G923 and all the others? You have cogs in all the others that tend to move first on one side and then on the other. And you get slight movements in between because you can't have a perfect alignment. There needs to be certain space in between them. So when they move, they tend to create some sort of a movements in between, which are, I would say, an empty movements. And because of that, you don't get full experience of the actual driving because of the space in between and that empty movement, I would say. Let's put it that way. Now, talking about the loudness of the G Pro base. It has a little noise with active cooling, which is totally irrelevant, and you won't even hear it while driving or if you have your headsets on because of the other sound. But we have some high frequency tones through the TrueForce technology. So the higher TrueForce technology is, this will happen, and this is something that couldn't be avoided because of the components inside that actually create that noise. So this is something that needs to go and needs to happen, unfortunately. But regardless to that, compared to some others, this one is really quiet, and I'm talking about in terms of G923 and G920. Since you don't have any cogs clicking and clacking to each other each time they change direction or when the TrueForce is turned off or turned down. Now, checking out the quick release system, it kind of resembles to the Fanatics QR1 system, but with some, I would say, advantages when we're talking about the actual system and the connection and everything else. The external shell is really similar for those who have seen it or own a QR1 system. You will notice that definitely. But taking the wheel, for instance, and checking out the pins inside, they are spring bolted. So in those terms, no pin snapping like some reported happening to them on the QR1. But also here we have a floating mounting surface, which is great for connection, and it isn't fixed. So you have a canal here on the quick release, which actually follows, well, basically the wheel standoff follows the canal right here. So this is how the pins enter this quick release part. And I do have to mention, I was actually kind of curious how it will fit inside the quick release, since with Moses quick release, we can definitely rotate the quick release on the base however you want, and you can just place your wheel straight. You have to align this standoff or standout or whatever it's called directly to the canal so it can fit properly, because we have some sort of a bit more rounded shape on the edges for the connection. And the pins, as I already say, they're spring bolted, so they won't break in terms of if you, I don't know, accidentally, you can't do it here, but if you accidentally push something inside, which I would definitely suggest you don't, but they won't break because they immediately go inside when you press them. So that's really cool, and kind of protection from wearing and tearing here, since this is happening. So when it's moving like so, it kind of prevents from additional wear and tear on the sides. But since we have only one steering wheel on this base, available to connect. I don't think there's any point of removing the steering wheel unless you really have a tight spot when we're talking about your sim rig and the space in your flat house or whatever. So I'll leave it at that. It's quite easy to remove it. Basically pulling the circular part out, and you can't do it with only one hand. You can do it just like this, as you can see, and just push it forward towards you and take it out. Here we go. This is actually really nice and easy and outstanding, to be honest. So yeah, quite cool when we're talking about the quick release mechanism, and I'm definitely a big fan of this one because it resembles to Moza when we're talking about the quick release and how to remove the wheel, and this is quite cool, especially since we have this floating part, because it might lower down the wear. The front hole part is an air intake, and at the back you have an exhaust. We have a fan inside, which I don't know the dimensions, but on top you have 10 RGB LED rev strip. Below you have a small OLED display, which gives you an option to display not only dynamic telemetry data from the game, or it also depends on the game that you're going to play, but also accessing settings on the fly, which usually comes in handy for consoles. And since we don't have a G-Hub on consoles, this is why I mentioned that. So at the back, when we're talking about connections, we have a USB micro connection, which is really strange, and I'll say that right on front before I go to the conclusion part at the end of the video. It's really strange not to have a Type-C. And if somebody says because they have that canal and special connections, I've seen, for instance, on Angelbird that is producing SSDs for Blackmagic cameras and all the other accessories. They have a special canal also for Type-C. So it's not strange to have a Type-C cable that also has that canal and kind of creates a fixture inside your base or SSD, like I mentioned for the Angelbird, and it kind of easily fixates in there. It doesn't get pulled out by accident. So it's just something that I would like to point out. This is a USB micro connection, is the connection to your PC or console. We have additional 3 USB ports, proprietary protocol, so you can't connect everything due to the licensing, of course. And finally we have the DC input. The length is 290 millimeters, the height is 200 millimeters, and the width is 305 millimeters. Which, when we take into consideration about the whole size of the base, it's, comparing to some Moza base, well, basically all Moza bases, it's really big. It's really bulky. And I have R16 from Moza standing in my sim rig currently. Of course, I'm going to place this to show you more about it, but the R16 is much smaller. Okay, we have a much bigger quick release on the R16, but this one is bulkier so much, it depends what kind of rig chair do you have. So yeah, it'll be interesting for some of you guys. Depending on you will need to measure everything properly just in case. Now this is the clamp that you can use to attach your base to your sim rig or the table or anything similar to that, whatever you decide to do. If you have a custom made sim rig, it's all up to you, but this is the clamp and it's plastic, and I think I've seen better and I've seen worse, but apparently this one does the job quite nice. I'm a bit shocked at first, since we're talking about the plastic holding 11 Newton meters of torque, but it does the trick. But the best part about it, compared to Moza R5 or any other base from them that has their clamps, the clamps are on 2 sides, so left and right. And what happens here is that it divides, it goes into, let's say, more white. And what could happen here is that they interfere with your leg space. Here, since it's placed right in the middle, it doesn't interfere that much, or depending on your driving style, shouldn't. After all, we have a playseat sim rig that has actually a pole right in the middle of the chair, so this shouldn't be a problem, right? When we're talking about the clearance for the clamp, we have 80 millimeters clearance vertically and 40 millimeters clearance horizontally from the part that touches the edge of the desk to the part of the clamp. Now I need to check the bottom part as well, since you most likely, if you have some sort of a sim rig, you'll most likely try to avoid the clamp, even though, as I said, it doesn't go and interfere with your feet, with your legs. You have 2 additional feet right here that aren't removable, and they kind of fixate, help the clamp keep the base at a certain position. but they aren't unfortunately removable, so this might be a strange thing. And the weirdest part here is that we have three holes right here. So it's not a standard, which you would be used to. And if you have some certain plate that has enough space to drill additional holes, you can do that as well. But unfortunately, I don't understand why they didn't just simply place 4 holes, 2 on top, 2 on bottom, and give it more versatility for all the other sim rigs that we have at home, or I don't know if you want to drill a table or something similar to that. It's kind of strange. Since I mentioned everything at the front, I totally forgot to mention the start and stop button right here. So to turn it on, you just need to press it once, and to turn it off, you have to hold it a bit longer. Concerning the accidental press on the start stop button, you won't be able to press it because it's actually quite far away, and you won't be able to do that, because if you really want to switch it off, you have to hold it. And when we're talking about driving and any sort of driving style that you're considering, you will never get into the position where you're driving and holding a steering wheel and doing a long press on the start stop, so you don't have to worry about that. Now for the steering wheel, we have dual analog pedals that can be programmed to be either throttle, brake, clutch, or dual clutch. Also, we have 2 magnetic shifters that are using Hall sensors, so there aren't any mechanical switches here. And what does that mean? So for instance, it doesn't have that click, and the Hall sensors, what they do is you're actually breaking a sensor, right? A sensor line. And what does that mean for you guys? It means that no wear, no tear. This will actually work over time as much as you wish and as much as you want. That's it. That's really cool, because for others you have a click, right? Or when we're talking about Logitech G923, G920 and the G29. The travel for the shifters is 10 millimeters. We'll get to the part of the steering wheel later on when I connect everything again to my sim rig and gonna go through the buttons and I'm going to explain everything to you there. But let's first go with the pedals. So we have load cell pedals right here, and they can be connected directly to your PC, and you can connect them to your G Pro wheel when we're talking about console. The pedals are a big change from Logitech. Load cell is responsible for interpreting the amount of force that you are pressing on the pedal, and that is translating it to braking force inside the game, and definitely different than the past entry level pedals. Now what is load cell? Load cell is responsible for interpreting the amount of force that you used to press on the brake pedal and translating it to the braking force back into the game. And of course this is really different comparing it to their past models. As already stated, first the past models were all plastic, and these actually have a nice brushed aluminum finish and definitely feels outstanding. And the only thing that we have plastic here is the base of the pedals. So first of all, my apology immediately for the connection part and mounting mechanism. The thing is that these 3 holes underneath the base are actually perfectly fine with my F1 Ultimate Edition, and it's kind of obvious, not obvious, but logical, since Logitech and Playseat usually do collaborate a lot. So in those terms, they made additional hole in the middle. I don't know if other direct drive base have this sort of a hole in the middle, so something like a triangle thing, but apparently this base has, and the plate on the F1 Ultimate Edition has it as well. So do know that. But for the purpose of the video, I placed the middle plastic bracket here because you can combine. You can actually use those 3 screws and use the plastic clocking mechanism at the same time, which will give you more fixation on the plate, right? But it really doesn't need to be here. I just actually placed it so I can see if it will bother my legs while driving, and to be honest, I'll say it right up front, it does not. So since I was driving Formula 1 and I only use brake and throttle, the clutch is on the far left side, so I didn't use that because you don't need that in F1. The thing is, it still didn't get in the way of my legs, so that's kind of cool, to be honest. Now let's start with the pedals, right? So the pedals, the throttle is quite alright. The clutch, even though I don't need it, I tested it just to see the force and everything. but the brake is for me a bit, I would say, not stiff enough. In terms of, you have some sort of a distance that it actually has a free travel. It's not a free travel, it actually does actuate in the game, but then when you get to a certain part, but that's like almost at the end, so it's not that stiff. And comparing it to CRP pedals from Moza, which actually have really stiff spring that kind of gives you more, I would say I'm more used to a stiffer brake, and I think loads of you guys that actually already drive sim racing and already have a sim rig will know what I'm talking about. Here it's kind of has loads of travel for the brake, and I think that's a bit too much. You do get additional springs and additional dampeners inside the box with the pedals, but I don't think that will fix it. Of course, there is in the future where they can acquire or sell additionally or give away additionally, it doesn't really matter, stronger springs that will make this dampening of the brake pedal a bit more, which will be much better. When we're talking about the base, it really does take a lot of space on the plate here, and it raises the steering wheel compared to the R16 from Moza quite a lot in this sim rig. And I would say I actually placed my TV and everything else around it based on that setup. But the thing about it is that, as far as I know, you can adjust the height of the plate for the base here in this sim rig because you're sitting in a Formula 1 position and there isn't a possibility to adjust it up and right. So there's that. So in those terms, the wheel is a bit too high. I would place it, as you can see, this is the position that I'm currently driving. I would place it somewhere here. This would be ideal, and if you saw my past videos regarding Moza, you would notice that my wheel is much lower. Now for the quick release, we have it right here, and to be honest, checking out how it's designed and everything, the connection part and everything that I mentioned earlier, there is no flex between the wheel and the base, which is outstanding, of course, and this is why I love this quick release, without a doubt, something really similar to Moza, and really brings the, I would say, joy to my face, because it doesn't have any flex. So when I try to push it up or down, the base and the wheel flex at the same time. And that's not because of the wheel or the base, that's because of the plate right here and the whole construction. So the whole construction is flexing, and this is good because you don't have any flex right here near the connection, and that's quite solid because we have a solid construction in between the wheel and the base. Now, while driving, there's really smooth transitions, no rattling. The only thing that could rattle here is the construction again. If the torque is too high, and that is actually the same thing what happened with me on the R16, because the whole construction was shaking, and that's it concerning that part. Now the TrueForce has finally got its meaning with being released here with the G Pro compared to the G923, and giving more, I would say, granular transitions of the feel to your hands, transferring the track and everything that you should feel in the game, transferring everything to your wheel, which gives you more sensitivity and more sensation while driving. Now the shifters don't create additional noise more than they should. They have slight indications here on the side which give you some sort of an indication, if you're a beginner, that the right one is for upshifting and the left one is for downshifting. That's quite alright. The buttons, I think they're quite alright when we take into consideration the travel. They do kind of resemble to your standard buttons, which is alright, I would say, but that's to your personal preferences and I won't go into that. The knobs here are outstanding and you can really adjust everything there. Unfortunately, they aren't very reachable while driving. For instance, if you're driving an F1 car and you want to edit your pit stop with changing your tires or adjusting something, balance or anything similar to that, you actually have to take your hand off of the wheel and adjust it. It would be much more easier if something like that was near your thumb, but then we will be doing a completely different steering wheel and completely different orientation. This right here gives you an access if you're already in the pit lane, and in those terms, if you can adjust everything that you need to in those short couple of 10 seconds, depending on the pit lane length. When we're talking about some cons, so I could say that the wheel has 1080 degrees rotation because of the clock spring design compared to the other wheelbases, which can indefinitely turn on one side. There's also one more thing, a lack of options to increase wheel friction and inertia. And to be honest, there's only one wheel available compared to the other direct drives. So if you want to change styles of driving, Formula Rally, GT or street cars, it really doesn't matter. You could drive it with this, don't get me wrong. This is a perfectly designed wheel. Even though for rally racing, I wouldn't suggest the D-shaped wheel. It should be totally round, but that's a different story. But all in all, the shape and 300 millimeters of size, it goes in a segment where it tries to cover all racing. I hope in the future Logitech will try to develop different styles, different wheels that will bring you guys that individually want to drive certain game like Formula or Rally or GT or anything similar to that, that will give you an option with a, I don't know, butterfly design, Formula 1 racing wheel and similar stuff like that, which would be amazing because this is currently a closed ecosystem. And as far as I noticed, now I connected everything separately, so I have Pro pedals separately directly connected with USB to PC. If you're connecting them to a console, then you need to connect it directly to the steering wheel, and then we have the steering wheel additionally. So let's go with the pedals, and it gives you an option to adjust the clutch sensitivity, brake sensitivity. So with lower number, lower sensitivity, you get, of course, depending on how you game, but if you press less with a higher sensitivity, it goes up to the maximum much quicker. If you lower the sensitivity, slight press won't do, so you have to push it so hard to access the 100% that it's basically unbelievable. So it's all about adjusting. This is all about personal preferences, don't get me wrong. This is nothing to do with the pedals, of course, and this is something that you'll have to play around a bit just to, let's say, get the ideal combination of everything. Then we have accelerator sensitivity, which kind of does relate to your F1 driving. If you have your traction control off, this is quite important. And you have the brake force. And that's about it when we're talking about pedals. Let's go to the wheel and base. So we have assignments, which already, as you can see, have triangle, squares, cross, circle, which are just an indication of the buttons that are here: gear up, gear down, L2, R2, options, share, L3, R3, and that's about it. So when we go to the steering wheel, of course, you can check the angle, operating range, and adjust the sensitivity. Operating range can be adjusted up to 900, but this is just for depending on the driving and what you want to do. And in those terms, I actually didn't have to adjust anything in the F1 2023 when we're talking about, but the angle is adjusted before the game, so yeah, don't get me wrong. Dampener strength, then we have force feedback filtering, and you can enable auto force back filtering. And you have audio effects, which are only available with TrueForce supported games. Then we have dual clutch pedals, where you can adjust clutch bite, left-right adjustment of the pedals. So you could place gas or throttle, brake, clutch, handbrake, axis A, axis B. And then we go to the light sync, where you can adjust the rev strip on the bass, so it can go left to right, right to left, inside out, outside in, and you can do, of course, custom and, of course, adjust the brightness. And that's basically it when we're talking about the Logitech G Hub. I do have to say one thing: the price, when we take into consideration the bass, the pedals and the wheel, even though with the new connector you could use your older pedals with this bass and steering wheel, but honestly, my suggestion, if you're buying a bass and this steering wheel, buy the new pedals, because these are much better than anything before. So G923, G920, G29, I don't even have to mention the others. These pedals are much better, it doesn't feel plasticky. After this, you won't be even considering the other ones. That's the thing that I have to point out. It's a completely different story, and it really gives you much better feel while driving. The one thing that I thought I would see on the pedals is the rubber part in between where it says the Pro. I was actually expecting to be rubber, which will give you additional grip while placing your legs in the upward position, but it's just plastic with stripes. And it does create additional grip compared to some other flat surfaces that don't have anything, just clean surface, but still do take that into consideration. I was honestly expecting rubber for a better grip, but this isn't bad. If you have some shoes that are dedicated for your sim racing like I do, it's going to be quite alright. And the wheel is basically, I'm used to the Logitech steering wheel, so this is quite nice, quite outstanding. Love the design, and everything is, as always, from Logitech, designed to the last detail. Perfect, no flaws, and everything is outstanding. Hope you enjoyed this video. It's a bit different since we usually have Logitech bringing peripherals in terms of keyboards, headsets and mice, and since G923 nothing came out new. I know this steering wheel was in development for quite some time, and the price says it's a bit expensive when we're considering everything else. But when you take into consideration that this steering wheel can either go with Xbox or PlayStation, depending on the model that you buy, I decided to go with the PlayStation one because eventually, if I buy a console, it will be most likely PlayStation for Gran Turismo. But then again, you can't then connect it to your Xbox. So there's that. The cool thing is that I don't see many bases, such as direct drive, be compatible with consoles. Maybe some of them are, maybe I'm not that well informed, but getting the 11 Newton meters of peak torque, outstanding wheel with nice design that could be used for almost every style of racing, depending on your preferences, quite solid pedals, and I think they are somewhere in that price range. I would be more happier if the base of the pedals was steel instead of plastic, which would give more sturdiness and everything else. But they also fit on this playseat sim rig without a problem, because the holes are actually designed for this kind of plate, and I have nothing else to add except, yeah, that's it. All in all, regarding the price, that's it. I won't say anything more than that. You already heard my opinion. If you're strictly into Logitech peripherals and you really love what they do, this is the way to go. If you want to go with something extreme where you could actually swap wheels with a different one constantly, then of course you know the answer. But all in all, taking into consideration the experience that you get while driving, the wheel, the base, the pedals, and everything all together combined, it's an outstanding product. And being able to drive on your PC and then swapping to PlayStation or Xbox, that's all that I can say. Quite outstanding, and that's all there is to it for today, guys. If you want to check it out in more details, I'll place the link for the Logitech G Pro steering wheel and base and Logitech G Pro pedals in the description below. And finally, if you like this type of content, as already stated before, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell so I can see you next time in a new video. Thanks for watching. See you very soon. Bye bye.